maybe I'll stand here. I'll kind of like a freestyle, let's say. So first thing first, happy Women's Day to all the ladies here. So, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mentioned this. It's actually women have a very important social positions in the modern urban life in China. So, for example, 80% of the online sales are women's. So if you go to China, you need to pay attention to women. This is the first advice. Short introduction of myself. Chen is my actually family name, but to make it easier for everyone, I just ask everyone to call me Chen. Usually in China, there are about 54 million Chen, but I haven't had any confusion here, so that's totally fine. In the beginning, I was told that there will be around 20 or 30%. This is kind of like very surprised, and I'm very glad to see so many people are interested in Asia or China, let's say, in this topic. So this is how to say really, really big topic. So I don't know if how I can organize everything well, but I will try. I think, yeah. So I worked in, I was born and raised in China, and I arrived in Europe 12 years ago. So then most of the time I spent in France and China too. And then I arrived in Estonia 2 years ago. So my background was in media, television. And then later on I switched to the business side, e-commerce. And between 2012 and 2016, I founded 2 companies in Shanghai. And then I moved here. So let's, oh, by the way, this talk will probably last 20 to 25 minutes. There will be 5 minutes of the video. And then the slide is really, really badly made because I didn't have any time. So it was a really busy week, but let's start. Okay, it works. So what's, why I start with this, by the way, because in the media, we usually have a system. It's called 5W. It's basically to frame when we do a news report. It's like what and who and when and where and why. So I use a similar system, modify a little bit, but just try to structure it. So first, what's China? And lots of people ask me lots of the questions about China over the years. There are many questions, like, for example, like this. How's Chinese food? And how's life in China? And how to do business in China? And such and so on. So I guess all of you probably have some kind of the similar ideas about China in your head. Now, before we start, I'd like to ask you to do a very, very small exercise. Let's replace the Chinese and China in this sentence to European and Europe. So how would you answer this question? So it's kind of difficult, right? So that's the point I want to get to. So China and Europe, this is the size of the China and the people, population, and the GDP. And the other side is Europe. So the population is almost twice as Europe, and the size is very similar. And then the GDP, of course, Europe is still much higher, but China is already become the second in the world, the country. So I point out this is because, yeah, now you know when you go to China, you need to pay attention. There is no one China. There are many Chinas. So, and also China, of course, there are like some kind of like, we can make some quick comparisons. China is basically a gigantic startup. So most of people, like hustling around, half of people have no clue what's going on. And then, but there are lots of the opportunities and things move very, very fast. Challenges, complications, and sometimes also very risky. And then, of course, in Europe, it's mature market, it kind of closed, so it's difficult to break through. And then things kind of slow. It's very different, and organized and stable. The thing is, why I point out this is because before you go to China, you have to know about this. There are lots of chaotic things in China, lots of the challenge, lots of the complicated, very, the fast changing things. And that's mental preparation you need to do before you go there. If you are not okay with that, then probably staying in Europe is much better choice. So, and also, now we are talking about China and why you guys needed to take the risk. So we move to the why part. So the why part, usually, I would say, we have to focus on the three parts. It's like, why now? Why China? What's happened? What changed? So we pay attention to three trends. Usually this is like main things needed to focus. So the social part, let's say social trend, urbanization. There will be 350 million people move from countryside to China for the next about 10 years or 15 years. So every year estimate about 20 million people will do this kind of immigration from the countryside, which is almost, 15 times of the population of the Estonia. So it's a lot of people. And then in the future, there will be 160 cities with 1 million plus populations in China. So what does this mean? That means all these people from the countryside go to the city. They are looking for the better life qualities, which means they need housing, they need better service, they need the cities better organized. All these things represent opportunities. Let's say if you are architectures, or you are urban designer or service designer, all this could be your opportunity there. So, and then, since all these people are now getting rich, they move to the city, they want better things. That's a second change, economic change. So the China nowadays, well, in the coming years, will have 250 million of the middle class. And then there are around 4% of the population is who has liquid asset in their hand, more than $1 million, which means roughly 50 million people are millionaires. It's kind of like if you go to France, everyone you meet in the street are millionaires. So that's why the purchase power is very, very important, and which also bring another trend is before China is considered as a factory of the world. So made in China sell to the world. But now the trend is changed. Since the last 3 years, China becomes the biggest importer in terms of the consumer products. So now the new trend is made in global, sell to China. And this is also the opportunity. So, and the number below, $55 billion. And the date, November 11, 2018. This is a date, so it's kind of like Chinese version of the Black Friday. So you do the sales, online sales, everything. And this is the number of the one-day sales revenue. And does anyone knows GDP of Estonia of the last year? So I checked roughly $29 billion of the whole year. So that's the purchase power of the Chinese people have nowadays. Of course, they also travel to Europe. 130 million Chinese traveling every year. They spend $5,000 per person. It's the highest in the world nowadays. So this is also a big opportunity. Now the tech side, in the Asia, we can see lots of the new technologies, AI, AR, VR, or fintech, blockchains. Everything is very booming in Asia because they Asian or China is really embrace these kind of new technologies, and also the market can support them to do their experiments. For example, now I work in the Wolf 3D. We do the 3D avatar in the AI and VR field. So in this field, currently the whole market value in the global level is $68 billion per year. But by the time of the 2025, which means in 6 years, the value will be around 800 billion. So majority of this market will be in Asia, and majority will be in China. So if you are tech companies, there are lots of opportunities there. And also the Chinese companies are really eager to acquire the new technologies to cooperate with foreigner expert. Foreigner expert still have a very good image in China because we believe those experts bring the advanced knowledge and technology from the matured markets. So Chinese people are still very welcome Western experts. But then for the Chinese companies, so the $400 billion overseas acquisition is happened in 3 years. So, and then also the Chinese companies, why they so eager to do this, is also the domestic market competition pressure push them to do that. Because in China, the companies, the competition is extremely brutal, which means, so I can give you an example. One company, OFO, is selling bicycle. Of course, their business model or some technology is not good or something, but the first 2 years, from nothing to become multi-billion-dollar companies. And the next 2 years, they almost bankrupt. So that's in China. It's very fast. So there is always a fear of being left behind to these companies. And this is also the angle you can play around, work with Chinese company if you have the technology. The other thing is I did just a couple days ago, work with public company in China. So I just make offer double the price as we usually have. And I'm not sure about the price. I negotiate with them. I say like, hey, if you think it's too risky or it's price too high, maybe I can lower the price, but we will put you in the, like the later stage of on the pipeline. We are busy, we will deal with you later. And they said, no problem with the price, let's do it. So that's the thing why, because they want to get to the market first. It's very important in China. So, and then we talk about all this China, there are many Chinese markets, so there's a weird question. So when people say, I want to go to China, it's very important to ask yourself, which part of the China? What kind of city? What kind of the customer you want to deal with? Because it could be any Chinese city would be much bigger than the whole Estonia market. So that's our part. I will put a map here. So the map represents a system in China how we evaluate the size of the the city or importance. This on the left side, all these color circle things, the numbers, you can ignore the numbers because the number is completely outdated. But I show this is because the circles, the colorful circles represent each region's GDP level. So even the number is outdated, you can still see where is the big circle. And this is like most of the time is on the East Coast. That's an important part in the Chinese market because this represents the most, more than 70% of the population are living in this side. And then of course, the most of the, let's say, money or the knowledge or the big companies are on the East Coast. So here are some very, very basic metrics. It's not like official standard things, just give you an idea. Like the first year, $300 billion GDP per year and 50 million is higher. Currently, there are about 10 cities in this level, but the traditional big four, let's say, is Beijing in the capital, the green things on the north, and then the Shanghai on the east. Shanghai is like considered the most advanced city in the mainland China now. And then in the south part, yeah, I can use these fancy things. So the Shenzhen. Shenzhen is considered as Silicon Valley in China. So if you are doing the tech, especially the hardware manufacturer related business, go to Shenzhen, take a look. Shenzhen, let's say half of the tech unicorn in the world are in China, and more than half are in this city. So, and then the Guangzhou is traditionally is manufacture like for the consumer products like the I don't know, fridge or lights or these kind of things. But this whole region, 95% of the smartphone of the world come from this area. So even the iPhone is made there. So this is important to know. So choose very wisely. And now, for example, the first tier cities, the competition level is extremely high. All the multinational companies from the international level or the local level, or everyone is in these cities. So if you are there, let's say 10 to 15 years ago, that would be perfect. But now, it would be a nightmare. You will spend tons of money, you might barely break through anything. So, and just give the very simple example. Let's say I spend more money to living in Shanghai than in Paris. And the real estate price there is about 10,000 euros per square meter is on average. So this is a crazy city, and but it's also a very, very advanced city to visit. So if you have the opportunity, take a look. This is a city, but for the business-wise, I would definitely recommend not second, but actually the third, because second is also becomes a target of the lots of big companies, because everyone sees that first-tier company, first-tier city is so difficult, and they move to the second tier, but the third-tier cities, they actually have the huge potential. They usually have the decent amount of the population, and the GDP level is quite good. And also they are not like like Shanghai. They have a difficult to access to, let's say, modern lifestyle, Western, very designed products. And in Shanghai, it's very easy, but for them, it's different. So this kind of city is actually a nice place to start. So let's move to the next part, is who. So who will you be dealing with when you go to China? Of course, Chinese, right? So for this part, I will generalize a little bit. I just said like there are many Chinese, many Chinese market, but for the Chinese people, in terms of the culture, in my opinion, culture is kind of like common value or character of the whole nation. So you can still find some common things of the people. So Chinese people, there is one thing is, I think Chinese people are probably the most pragmatic people among those in the world. You can even say like Chinese are kind of similar to Jewish when doing the business. That means when you're dealing with the Chinese companies, there will be always many possibilities to negotiate with them because there are many elements will be involved. In Europe, it's most of the time quite simple. This is my product. This is the price, and we agree with the price, and you give him my money, and I give you the product. That's done. But in China, there are so many things could change the whole process. So which means you always needed to be very flexible. You could say there are so many, the time, the quality, the price, the market competition levels. There are so many things you can play around when you negotiate. And of course, when you, what you will get paid, money is a big part, but not the only part. You have to see when you go to China, it's a new adventure for you. So the market, the money is just one part. It could be build a connection, it could build a reputation, and sales channel. All this has a value too. So think about this and understand how to deal with Chinese people to be very flexible. I can give a very short examples. I dealt with, I helped a European company and Chinese company. The Chinese company is like #1 in this industry in the whole world. So the Chinese company offered the cooperation with the Western company, and then they said, hey, Chinese say, we will send you the contract, take a look, and if we agree, we can move forward. And then the Chinese also say, the contract is not, you cannot change or rewrite the contract, basically. So the Western company was like really shocked. Why are you sending me a contract which I cannot modify? What's the point, right? So this part is kind of immediately stuck. There's no way to move forward because Western companies say like, in this contract, there are like some terms we don't agree. We say no. And so I was involved in this part. I talked to both sides. I would say like, first I talked to the Chinese side. I would say like, this kind of contract is indeed very difficult to work in the Europe. How you manage to do that? They said actually we don't really follow the contract in the practice. This is kind of weird, right? And then the Chinese side also say like, actually we can bend the rule a little bit, but the Western side they say no, so everything is no. Basically we have no room to play around. Then I told the Western side, also like, hey, actually there is a different situation, so maybe we can come out to some kind of like agreement or something. So I checked both sides. I said like, which parts you guys can play around, bend the rules, so we make the list, and this list become an annex of the contract agreements. So now it's like, okay, we signed the contract, but also be aware that we discussed some kind of situation we can play around so they can move forward. I wouldn't recommend this kind of method, but I'll just give you an example how flexible Chinese could be. So, so now we talk about the who, more specifically, clients, competitors, and allies. So I found that there is one thing kind of like, how to say, over the years I saw in the Western world, people very often, when they talk about China, they think about the regulation, politics. Actually, all these things are wildly overemphasized in the Western world. Because most of the time in China, business is just business. You can just do the business like, there's no government or no regulation. Most of the time, it's not involved. If the Chinese want to do business with you, they might even bend the rules for you. So that this is not the part you need to concern. So always, I would suggest be calm when you go to the China, deal with the Chinese, you are nervous, you have the fear, you have the anxiety in your head. You will influence to your partners, and he will become the same. So just become and focus on the essential, the basic part, which is your customers, your competitors, and analyze the market. So for this part, customers, clients, relationship. Everyone says like you need a middleman sort of things to go to China. I will talk about this later, which is actually quite true. But a relationship is something more like you have the vision to build something for long term. So even when you are into the negotiation of the contract or in some corporation, you have all your dominant advantage. Just be aware to leave some margin and some room for your Chinese partners. This is how you build a relationship, because the relationship, after all, in China will be the most valuable asset you will have. So this part always needed to be very careful. So the second thing is the key figures. If like in today's occasion, we probably will talk more about B2B. So you will deal with companies. In Chinese companies, there are lots of the peoples involved when you deal with them. And most of them, you cannot remember their names, Chinese names, complicated. And then everyone has quite confusing titles. I see very big Chinese company, like one of the biggest, they have dozens of the CEO. It doesn't make any sense. That's like they can send the head of the region or head of the country become CEO. So you will meet like a CEO from France and CEO from I don't know, consumer group or CEO from some other technology part. So many CEO, and everyone, when you talk the more inside the Chinese company, you always found people have the different opinions. That they might say things very, very confusing and contradiction. So in this case, it's very important to figure out who is the key figure, because in the Chinese company, for one deal, there will be always a person who can say, we do this, and then everyone else shut up, do this. So this person you need to find out. And very often you can ask if you have the good relationship with your partners, you can ask the advice, who is this person? And then, of course, the motivation part. Motivation part is you need to understand why is this Chinese company want to work with you. So you can evaluate whether they are serious or not, and because to be honest, as a foreigners, you go to China, if you have no clue what's going on, Chinese can find hundreds or thousands ways to use you. Sorry, but that's a reality. So you need to figure out, are they serious with this project? Are they doing this for their specific needs? For example, their technology or the current product absolutely needs your technology, otherwise it didn't work. Or they might use just for PR purpose. They might just try and say bye-bye, or they might, you just, when you figured out this, you also understand where the money comes from. Do they actually have the budget to pay you or to do these things? So the last part, demanding. This is a key feature for the Chinese, very demanding in the market. Because in the Chinese market, there are so many offers, to be honest. Like, if we want to find, let's say, a foreigner designer, we can basically find everyone in China nowadays, from the Scandinavians to Italian, French, German, whatever you name it. So that's the thing. So they always will be asked a lot of things. They always want to, change the ideas. You kind of need to be prepared for that, to be very flexible, to be prepared to answer the needs very quickly. But on the other hand, if you have like super fancy reputation and portfolio, you can always play the card like, hey, I'm the boss, But that's also the difficult part. And then the competition part, I just mentioned multinationals. Every company is there now. So whoever haven't been there are already late. So you have to deal with this situation now. And then you probably need to think about how if you don't want to compete with them. For example, if in the ad or design agency, WPP has been there in China for more than decades. So this kind of things you always need to think about. And then the local giants. Does anyone know what BAT means in China? So basically, BAT means, first the B is Baidu. Baidu is Chinese Google. And A means Alibaba. And T is Tencent. Anyone knows Tencent? Yeah, good. The Tencent is a company you absolutely needed to pay attention. But so the local giants, they basically cover all the industry for the consumer part, let's say. They for example, the Tencent, they have the portfolio of the 700 companies they invest. And then between them, 68 went public. Only last year, there were 18 was become public company. So you can imagine they have the huge network. And then there's a funny thing is like BAT. You sort of kind of needed to choose a side. It's kind of like a huge network. You decide, okay, I want to work with this company. It seems good, And then you figure out, oh, this group belongs to Alibaba. And then you see another deal is very good, but they belong to Tencent. So it's kind of like, no, there's no way you can do that. This kind of things need to be pay attention. And then copycat. Copycat is kind of like nowadays I don't think it's a bad thing anymore. Even if you check the Americans newspapers, let's say Time Magazine or Business Insiders, you will always see a lot of articles about Silicon Valley try to copy the Chinese part. From the copy to China, become the copy from China. So the copy part actually is, is kind of like a very, very strong force to move the products, the service, the business model, innovative. So that's why the China, in a sense, it become most innovation company in terms of the consumer market for the business models. The technology-wise, let's say lots of technology has been invented in the Western side, but there were never had such kind of like use case in China, which I will show you later. So for the copycat part, what you need to pay attention is to find your unique strengths and value. For the Western companies, the most value you can rely on is brand value. So for the other parts, it's very difficult unless you have the unique skills. Otherwise, or you move very fast. So the copycats cannot follow you. So all these things, you need a little bit like, sorry, oh, I talk too much. Yeah, it's it's huge topic. I haven't, sorry. So expert, foreigners there, same as you. You have to figure out how to deal with them. And then the allies. This is the person, you can call it connectors or whatever, middlemen or like whatever, friends you like to call it. Credibility is the person can bring to you, basically icebreaker. And the second part, connector. Connect one person, you connect to many connections. This is important. And then the information source is very crucial because lots of information is not open to the, the foreigners. And then the deal makers. Sometimes you have the deal, you're not sure, ask your friend, hey, if I send this deal to your boss, is that okay or not? He will give you some suggestion. So for the how part, there are many ways to do things. For me, it's like, Yeah, I don't know how to say that. So basically, I found a video. It's two Scottish guys living in Shanghai for a bunch of years, and then they make the video about how they spend the whole day without wallet or cards, just use the phone. And the whole thing was happened in Shanghai. So Shanghai is not like every city in China, but I give you the view of the Shanghai is because so you can have the forward thinking of the future of the other cities. They will become Shanghai. So let's check the video.
So I just got a message from Matt
Yeah.
chat, which is basically Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, all right. Coffee. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use WeChat still, go into my favorite coffee supplier. That never happens because they're everywhere. Being able to use your phone to get on the subway is fairly new in China, and this is like the second time I've ever done it, so it still feels pretty futuristic. Just like WeChat or Alipay, I just hold my phone up to here, and bam, I'm in. How easy was that? So I'm halfway to where I was going, and I just realized that I forgot my socks again. So what I'm going to do is take out my phone, take a quick selfie, post it on my WeChat to tell my friends that I forgot my socks again, and go buy some new socks. Hey.
Okay, we have to be done now because I spent too much time. And then there are next parts, actually lots of explanation of these videos. We can talk afterwards. It's actually a very interesting part to understand the ecosystem in China. But let's give the, if you have questions or.
I think internal politics is something we completely don't understand because it's mirrored from the West and US influence. But international politics, US is trying to abandon Huawei and pushing this same approach to the Europe. And this China expansion to Europe is also, so it's a complex question, but is it?
Well,
is it
I think the answer is very simple. Do you want to do business or you want to do politics? So if you want to do business, focus on the money part, focus on making the deal. And actually for that, it's not that difficult. Unless you compete with Huawei. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. My question to you is, like, if Western companies want to do business in China, do Chinese people speak English well?
Oh, that's actually a very good question I would like to talk about, but it's very difficult. Most of them, they don't speak English. I had a meeting a few days ago. Me and my colleague and Chinese person there in the meeting, he spoke English. My English is not good, but he's disaster. So I didn't understand anything. In the end, I have to repeat everything in Chinese afterwards. So yeah, you need someone to speak Chinese. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chen. And